Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 65th episode of Don't Forget the Popcorn. One thing I must say is when it comes to movies, I tend to gravitate to more polarizing, controversial films. Not always, but sometimes knowing or hearing a movie shocked audiences or it made people react a certain way are films I just need to see. Some people think certain films are just crazy and insane, and I'll watch them and I think they're just whatever. Sometimes they have my eyes wide open or really take me in with the subject matter or with the things I'm seeing on screen. A lot of the time, though, I'll watch something and I feel like the director just put certain things in the movie purely for shock value and will have no artistic merits on the subject itself. I really don't care. Art is art, and if someone wants to put something nuts in their movie, go for it. I'm a firm believer in giving artists freedom to do their art. We need auteurs of the world, and I'm going to be talking about a particular film from one of them. Today, we're going to be talking about Lars Von Trier's Dogville. Dogville was released in 2003 and stars Nicole Kidman, Paul Bettany, and Stellan Skarsgård, with some great supporting guys including Chloe Sevigny, James Caan, the great Harry Anderson, Patricia Carson, and Lauren Bacall. Now, I'm a little new to the Trier train, but I've been on it and making stops on his films, and let me say it's been a wild ride. Now, I made a stop here in Dogville, a small town in the Rockies set in, I believe, the 1930s. Now, when watching the movie, I sort of put myself in the times and the mindset of this period and the people who inhabited this town, which is something I think you need to do while watching this movie. Lars Von Trier is a controversial guy already, from the way he treats his actors, to his press conferences, down to the real things, what he puts in his movies. We all know about all the allegations with Bjork and issues with Paul Bettany. I mean, to me, he's the Kanye West of filmmakers. But I'm not here to review the artists, I'm here to review the art, even though it's really hard to separate the two sometimes, especially when so much art is a reflection of one's personality. I'm not going to review this movie chapter by chapter, but I'm going to talk about it in detail to drive some of my points home. So this will not be a spoiler-free review. Now, right away, I can see someone thinking Lars is a pretentious piece of shit for how he staged this film right from the go. He shot this black box style in a studio in Sweden, and I love that he uses legendary Swedish actress Harriet Andersson. She's a gem. As it opens, it's shot from a top view, and I thought the stage was a giant map. But no, it was the entire set of the film and the entire town, with lines drawn in white chalk to signify where things were. For example, the gooseberry bushes were chalk drawn shrubbery with the words gooseberry written inside of them on the black stage floor. The movie is pretty much void of actual structures, buildings, and props. They use imaginary doors and walk around and interact with imaginary objects. Even the dog is fake. Now, I know this immediately turns some watchers off. I myself found it hilarious and pretty much laughed every time someone opened a fake door and shut it behind them. It rolls like a stage play split into 9 distinct chapters, with some velvety narration from John Hurt, which has a Wes Anderson type of feel to it, but I think it worked very well for the story and its very minimalistic setting. In the hands of someone else, this would not work. But the way Lars shoots mostly close-ups and focus is really heavy with the characters, it grabs you into what you are really supposed to take in from this movie instead of being distracted by the background. Now, the movie's plot is quite simple. A young woman runs away and ends up in a small town to hide from some gangsters looking for her. When she gets there, the people of the town give her 2 weeks to prove if she's worthy of staying. It's a parable in the way the chapters are broken down. Now, I love this fairy tale like vibe we got going on. The movie builds our lead Grace up to this mythical like creature, and Kidman's beauty and subtle betrayal brings his character to life in a magical kind of way. Her name is Grace. It's fitting as she gives an angelic like presence, blessing this small shitty town with gifts of love and wisdom. And the way in which the town receives these gifts she bestows on them divided me at first. Because on one hand, the town's reception is warm and positive, but on the other, the ungrateful nature in which some of these people reciprocate her love is slightly annoying. Which brings me to Tom, who is oddly named Thomas Edison Jr., even though he's got nothing to do with the famous Thomas Edison. Tom has fallen in love with Grace, and Grace also feels for him as well. It's evident in the way they interact with each other. Even the others notice it. Tom is the one perpetuating all of the ideas on how to make the town love Grace. He sees himself as a writer and a philosopher, but this guy is one of the worst movie characters of all time. Brilliantly played by Paul Bettany, Tom's character becomes a catalyst for this whole shebang in the way everything goes down in the town. A true wolf in sheep's clothing, I struggle with Tom more than any other character because, in one sense, I did agree with Tom from time to time and did feel for him a couple of situations. But Tom is an asshole and is so weak of a person, I couldn't have any respect for him. Characters like Tom in films are the reason movies can be great because Tom's character represents all of the darkest and lightest aspects of humanity. I mean, it's even pointed out in the film towards the end in a scene. He was perfectly written and acted as the actual train that keeps this train moving in this 3-hour runtime. Each and every one of his new ideas in order to bring grace and salvation keeps us diving further and further into the pit of Von Trier. And as the rabbit hole goes further down, we realize why he set this film in 1930s America. An outsider's looking in perspective of all the things that shaped this country he wanted to portray. Being a Danish filmmaker, he was criticized about this film. Some called it anti-American. And while I can see and hear your argument, I would have to disagree with that criticism. In this movie, Grace is permitted to live in this town and as a working citizen who is paid for her work. She works for each household in the town for a period of time each day. With her small wages, she buys these weird little ugly handmade dolls from the town's general store. There are 7 of them, and she saves up to buy them little by little. This, in my eyes, and I could be wrong, represented our hard labor hours we put in here in this country in order to buy things to show something for our hard work. It wasn't so much about the dolls because they were, in the film, admittedly ugly and useless. It's the fact that she worked hard for them and earned them is what makes them special. We show our vanity in this country through consumer goods, and typically useless ones far too often. Big houses, expensive cars, fancy clothes, jewelry, etc. We grow attachment to these items. We will discuss this a little more later. I felt this movie really did represent the darkest and lightest aspect of this great land quite well when you really think about it. It probably won't set in until after you watch the film and you're letting it sink in. After a while, the police who are in the back pocket of the mob are looking for Grace comes to the town and puts up some missing persons posters with none other than our precious Grace on them. They are instructed to tell the police of any information they have regarding her. The town, of course, gets spooked, and this is when things start to take a very dark turn. They are divided on what to do, but they do end up proceeding as normal, and things seem to be okay at the moment. Then, on the 4th of July, the police come back and swap out the missing posters for wanted posters, accusing her of bank robberies that took place within the last few weeks, which we know is a lie because she's been there this entire time. However, even with these people knowing this, they still act an ass and hold leverage over this quote unquote fugitive, coming up with the solution to not only pay Grace less money, but increase her workload as well as an even trade for these people harboring a now fugitive. Here in this country, criminals are not giving the same opportunities, especially in the workforce. They obviously work shittier jobs and for less money and kind of have to take it because they don't have a choice. That's exactly what Grace is going through here. Like an ex-con checking the box next to, have you ever been convicted of a felony? If so, please state the nature of your crime on a job application. She wanted to be free from the mob, so this was what she had to deal with. Hell, it can even be compared to an illegal immigrant here trying to find work. Now that her workload has increased and she starts making mistakes, and boy, these people are really treating her different. She works with the guy who runs the apple orchard, Chuck, played by the great Stellan Skarsgård. He takes a liking to her as she is one with the apples, unlike anyone else he's worked with. She reminds him of his time in the city. Chuck is attracted to her and uses leverage against her and threatens to turn her in if she doesn't sleep with him. Well, that doesn't matter because he takes what he wants from her anyway. In a very vicious scene that left me super uncomfortable, despite this, they go on and the treatment of Grace increasingly gets worse. The thing about this film is it shows you the absolute worst in people. I mean, humanity stripped down to the lowest form of vermin, breathing filth, you could call it. At this point, I will be 100% honest. I felt my temperature rising because of how upset I was getting at what I was seeing. Now, Tom and Grace at this point are pretty much keeping to themselves, and even with her reduced wages, her and Tom managed to buy the $7 from the general store. Grace is confronted in her home one night after she is seen with Chuck in the apple orchard. It's his wife. Now she has a bunch of kids with this man, 7 to be exact. She blames Grace for what is happening with her husband, and Grace explains she has no interest with him. As punishment for this, she smashes 2 of her dolls and tells her if she can hold back the tears, she won't break all of them. Grace can't help it and cries, and she proceeds to break all 7 dolls. Now keep that in mind for later. Grace has had enough, and Tom comes up with a plan for Grace to escape. Now, why would she need to escape if she's a free woman? Yes, I wondered that too. But to make a long story short, they plan to get her out with the shipping of apples. The driver is an asshole and lies and manipulates Grace and ends up having his way with her. Then he turns the truck around, lies, and tells the town that she hid in his truck, and Tom lies and says that she stole money even though it was him. So pretty much everyone here is a piece of shit, and Tom is the worst of them all. Now, back to how this film does show some of the darkest times reflected in this country. Slavery is one thing America is and has always been known for. Now, obviously, other countries had slaves. America just did it on a different scale. They helped move this country forward much faster, making America the powerhouse it became to be. Well, Grace's punishment for running away was giving a shiny new metal collar to wear, attached to a chain that is attached to a big weight, but light enough to walk with, but heavy enough to prevent escape. Does this sound a little familiar to you? At this point, I was losing my mind a little, screaming obscenities at the screen and taking off my hoodie because I was boiling hot. I'm like, okay, I guess she is a slave now. The little wages she was getting before are non existent, yet she is absolutely still expected to work. She's a fun time for all the men in the town except Tom. She only wants him in freedom, and this is increasingly making him angry. He can't live with the fact that he is a weak man and didn't stop every man in town from having their way with his girl. Every woman in town treats her like pure trash, and she gets humiliated daily. Grace is literally treated as some of the worst slaves were back in the day. I really couldn't believe what was happening. I couldn't believe Kidman agreed to some of this stuff. Lars is one of those directors that sometimes I feel like just wants to shock his audience, which with him I think is one of his strengths. Not always. Antichrist, my God, that film scarred me on every level. But in this movie, I think it is all worth it. All the stuff you see here, all the ways you were feeling. For a long time in this, I was just asking why and kind of found myself hating the second act of this film until I saw the third act. I was growing extremely angry and frustrated with how he was dragging out this woman's misery. I just wanted to ask Lars why. Tom has a meeting with the town and he has Grace express herself and all that she's been going through in the last few weeks. After she speaks to these stupid freaks, they get scared and all of a sudden want to get rid of her, fearing she would tell of their behavior. The town voted on it, somewhat of a democracy of sorts, another thing practiced here in America. In fact, they vote on quite a few things in this film, including whether she should stay or not to begin with. Tom does the bitch ass thing we knew he would and calls the mob to have them come and get Grace. Now, this is what made everything in the second act all worth it. These idiots think they can just wash their hands of the dirt they have done, but they don't know who they are dealing with. Revenge is a dish best served cold, and one thing here in America, we don't take no shit. You mess with us, we gonna come back way harder. I mean, what's the old saying? These colors don't run? Well, I'd have to say that they don't. This isn't a perfect country by any means. Its inception is a whole controversy in itself, also how it came to power. But this is America, and man, there is no place like it. There's a reason people come here, a reason why people come and don't want to leave. This country has everything to offer, including the good and the bad. I can't speak on how Lars feels about this place, though. His films like Mandalay, Dancer in the Dark, and of course this, but I think he does have a dark perception of this land while also holding high admiration for it. He makes his movies in English with lots of American actors, and they are usually the leads in his films. This movie is almost like holding a mirror up to the States and seeing a reflection of itself with no makeup on, fresh out of bed. The gangsters pull up, and my man James Caan is the lead man of the mob, and he's also Grace's dad. They have a very interesting and relevant conversation, and after this convo, Lars makes it all pay off as Grace orders her father and his goons to brutally murder everyone in the town with her specific instructions. My favorite being as making the mother watch her kids get killed one by one, and she's told if she doesn't cry after two, they can live. Well, I think we can guess how that went. As the town burns, Grace blows Tom's brains out herself as he was the absolute worst person in this whole thing. I cheered, I screamed, I was so happy. After watching that shit, I needed a drink. The revenge she puts on him couldn't be more American. I love that. So when people say this movie is anti-American, I think I personally disagree. Just an outsider looking in perspective on this country as we all have our thoughts on other parts of the world as well. Dogville is one of the most insane, interesting, infuriating, and engrossing films I've ever seen. I thought the art choices were actually great and gave this movie a style and vibe that just rolled. I didn't feel the 3 hour runtime at all. I mean, you are just so angry you can't feel it at all. I invested a lot of emotions and energy into watching this, as I've done with pretty much all Von Trier films. The filmmaker speaks to me in a way, and I honestly can't get enough of his stuff. Dogville is a film that I can't say everyone would like, but I think it would keep everyone's attention. An art house masterpiece that deserves more eyes on it. This could honestly, maybe, be one of the best movies ever made. I don't know. I've seen it twice now, and I'm still in awe of it. So, with that said, I am going to give Dogville a 9.8 out of 10. Guys, thank you so much for watching my Dogville review. Let me know if there's a film you want me to review. Please like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot and it won't cost you a thing. I got a podcast with my buddy, The Cutting Room Floor. I'll link that below for more movie content. Follow me on Letterboxd, Ralph Vader. I'll link that below as well. I will be back next week. And don't forget the popcorn.